Greg Weiss.
And we are good dudes with bad hearts.
No, literally. Our hearts are broken.
I have heart failure.
And I have a transplant.
We never thought we'd have heart problems.
But we do.
And they're real.
And they suck. And that's why we're here.
To talk to you about heart failure,
heart attacks, and everything that comes with these conditions.
Each week we will bring you an episode featuring guests with heart issues.
We're talking about doctors and health professionals.
And we're talking about everyday people.
Like you and I. Together, we'll share useful information.
Providing useful lifestyle tips.
And how to prepare heart-healthy meals.
We'll tell our stories and hopefully make your hearts
better.
Welcome to Change of Heart.
Welcome everyone to yet another episode of Change of Heart. I am your host, Anthony Gethers, and I am with my
co-host, Greg Weiss. Good morning.
And today we have a very unique guest. I was talking to him at the gym, and we were basically talking about the whole idea of my situation when I was traveling to Europe. I was telling him about my heart situation, and he said, "Hey, man, do you want another guest?" And I was like, "Well, who would that be?" And he says, "That would be me." I was like, "Well, you, man, because you have great, cardiac condition." And then he mentioned at some point that he grew up and he had a heart murmur. So today we have Edel, like the singer, Fernandez, and he will discuss with us his situation, how he was able to grow out of it. Some of us are not so lucky sometimes. Some of us find out later that we have this problem. But yeah, so welcome to the show, Edel.
Welcome to the show, Edel.
No, thanks for having me, guys. I'm really happy to be here. Really happy to share my story. It's one that I feel like not too many people are very aware of, that they don't hear often enough or at all. And I love that this is a platform that men can come together and have these kinds of literally heart-to-heart conversations about these things, and hopefully come together and overcome these together.
Where did it all start?
So, I was born in Mexico, and so I was born in Mexico in a small state called Puebla, which is about 4 to 6 hour bus ride south central of Mexico City. And Mexico City is about dead center in Mexico. It's the capital of the country. And my mother was a teacher, and so I was diagnosed, and I was literally right on that little cusp of, we should open this guy up and fix his heart, or we can instill overcome these challenges together and instill these proper habits, healthy habits that help him maneuver his life in a forward progress manner. So we decided not to open me up, and we kind of went through it. And I guess when we came here, we actually crossed the border illegally. And so that was a nice little stress test to put a nice little toddler through. But and I got to this country, right? So I was roughly about 5 or 6 years old when I did that with my mother.
Mm-hmm.
And then we come to this new country, and we do all this movement from, basically, we cross into Texas, go to California, and then from California we go cross country into Westchester, and then I come finally we call them in Rockland County.
Okay.
And
how
because of the
old
language barrier, I was about 5 years old by the time I got here.
Oh wow. Okay.
And so my mother she always did her due diligence. I never missed a doctor's appointment when I was with her. So she did an awesome job. And with the language barrier, my understanding of a heart murmur was a hole in my heart. But through later research, found out that it's not a hole in the heart; it's the holes in my heart, which they meant were the valves in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't. The way a doctor diagnoses this, he has to take the stethoscope, and he hears like a swooshing sound.
Mm.
So it's an irregular heartbeat, and the valves are irregularly firing. And what it does is it makes me very, very prone to early onset. It leaves me at a high risk for heart failure, heart disease, and I guess on the psychological aspect of it, also leaves me very prone to having high anxiety
Really?
issues, panic attacks.
Okay. Even at
Yeah. So
even at that early age,
and
you knew
also
you had that?
it messes with the yeah. Well, like we kind of had to get coached through it along the way, but I was also told I probably should not be so involved in very competitive sports. I should be active to maintain myself, but not at a very high competitive level, which I kind of disregarded. And I ended up playing very competitive sports throughout my entire life.
Mhm.
Which, thinking about it now, it makes sense why my mom would not want to be present in most of my games. I think she was very fearful of what was potentially could potentially happen.
Mm. Wow. So,
But
and now,
yeah,
how old are you when you were?
hit the ground running with sports.
Yes. Yep. I mean, how old were you when you decided that you want to go into sports? I mean, obviously, look, was your town actually when you came to Westchester? Were you surrounded by athletes?
So I was in Westchester. I wasn't at the age where organized sports was prominent. It wasn't until when we moved into Rockland, and I lived in Spring Valley, and I was always an outside kid.
Okay.
So in those times, your neighborhood raised the kids.
Sure. Sure.
Like my mother, she was a single mom, so she was always at work. So especially in the summer, I was always outside playing sports with the neighbor kids.
Mm.
And because those weren't at least from what my mother understanding was, those weren't like very competitive times. She was okay with me going outside and being with my friends.
Okay.
And whoever's parents were home that day, they were they were the ones that were responsible for all the kids that day. We would all go back to their house,
Oh,
hang
wow.
out, come back out. And sports was always a big thing with all the kids because back then it was a low income environment. So most of us didn't have the video games that were coming out, and video games were also still very new at that
Okay.
time because it wasn't how it is today, where everybody's locked in on screen and every household has some kind of video game, and every kid is playing a video game for 3+ hours a day.
Mm.
Back then, if you weren't outside for 3-4+ hours a day, you were the weird, you were the odd one out. Now
Yeah,
it's
they
kind of
never
the
saw
opposite.
you. They never saw you. What's he doing inside all day?
Wow.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, so
Um,
all my friends play sports, of course.
a question I have, Adele, is about your doctors. Did you always have the same doctor? Did you always see the same cardiologist who was watching what was going on inside you?
Well, back home, no, because we were moving around a lot, and it wasn't until we settled in new city when I started to see the same general physician.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the same that doctor because before that it was like I said, we were low income, so it was kind of like a clinic kind of environment. So it was basically whatever doctor was available.
And you would
Unfortunately,
update them. You would always tell them you had a heart murmur, so they were always
my mother
looking
would
for
tell
it.
them, and then well, they would always find it.
Okay.
They would always tell me, "Do you have something with your heart?" Because yes, it's one of the first things they do as soon as the doctor walks in is he tests. That's one of his first issues. The first things that he checked between that, one of the first. So they would always confirm it for us.
Gotcha.
It was nothing we ever had to hide or have to disclose. It was very
Gotcha.
within minutes of the checkups. They would tell us, "Oh, you have a heart murmur," and we're like, "Oh yeah, we know." So
Well, no, but and the reason why I ask is it's usually one of two things. Sometimes people see a doctor almost their whole lives, the same doctor, and other times they're always meeting somebody new who's either, like you said, rediscovering it or overlooks it and doesn't see it at all. And it sounds like you've been very blessed that when you've had these meetings with these physicians, that they were able to point out that your issue was foremost in your condition.
Yeah, no, it was definitely nice, and honestly, I was very blessed to have this kind of cocktail of things that kind of worked in my favor. So my mother's history is, so me and my mother were immigrants. My brothers are both first generation immigrants because they were both. I have two brothers that were born here, but my mother, she was actually raised on this very big farm, like in a very big farm area. So all the food that she had ever consumed through her life, through the majority of her life, until we came here, she knew where it came from. My grandfather's land bordered a river, so they always had fresh fish if they wanted fish. If they wanted chicken, the chicken was literally pecking was pecking around 20 minutes before it was on the table. And any kind of livestock or any kind of like butcher cut you wanted, you knew exactly where it came from because it was a very big barter system. If you didn't have the fruits and vegetables on your property, you're most likely your neighbor did. So you would just walk your way down, see what they had, and if they had something of their interest, then you would just trade. Or kind of like, hey, I owe you.
Okay, now as a young
part?
kid, it didn't catch you off guard that you saw the chicken out, roaming the yard, and then like a half hour later it was on the table. Like you weren't like,
Well,
oh my God.
Well, I was always like, I was very young, so I didn't witness it, and I have a lot of other like kind of issues where I kind of disassociated a lot of parts of my early life.
Okay.
Because of kind of like my upbringing and things that happened around me. So there's parts of it that are kind of, there's gaps in there.
Yeah,
but for the most part,
you omit certain stories from the life mix.
Right. The bad ones, or the really bad, like the not too bad ones, and the really really traumatic ones, I kind of have locked in there somewhere.
Okay.
Like everybody else. But no. So my mother always knew what kind of fruits and vegetables were in season and when to get them appropriately. And she kind of carried that knowledge coming here. So when we would go in the supermarket, she would know these fruits aren't supposed to be in season. Why are they on the shelves? So she would kind of avoid those at certain times of the year. I guess unbeknownst to her, she knew when these things were starting to be like grown in labs and they were adding all these chemicals to our fruits and vegetables. So she would always kind of have that knowledge. And growing up, I hated it because in the house we never had fruit snacks, never had sodas, we never had any of those like super like highly processed foods. It was never in the house, and I always hated it because I would be in class during snack time, and I look to my left and my right, and all my friends had all these snacks that I wanted, and I'd open up like my bag and I'd have like fresh fruits in there. But unbeknownst to me, that was what my mom was helping me out. So when I would ever have like any kind of soda consumption, it was me sticking off to my friend's house and having a little bit there. But there was never any in the house, and I kind of carry that habit now. I don't drink sodas as much. My alcohol consumption is not very high. I try to eat very clean now, and these are all habits that were instilled in me at a very young age.
Okay.
And this was before I took sports very, very serious. And roughly around the time I was about 13 is when I started, like 12, 13 years old is when I started to take soccer very, 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 very serious, to the point where I would ask my mother to buy me books on like what kind of drills I can do. And in those books, they also have like they kind of help you guide yourself with diet plans. And I would very much so take in that information, and I was trying to get to the highest level possible. And if eating the right thing was going to help me, it was just like, you know what, if this is what I need to do, it wasn't that big of a sacrifice to me. And it kind of came, the heart murmur was put on the back burner, and it was how far can I like push myself safely, and how far can my talents and my consistency and discipline take me in regards to the sport. So it was kind of like I said, it was kind of a nice combination of things that kind of took me farther than I guess I should have been able to.
Can I ask you, like, were you monitored with blood pressure, with blood sugars? Was that a part of your routine, knowing what your heart was doing? Engel?
It was very hot, and those times I remember that every so often the teachers would come in and they would teach us how to take like our own pulse.
Yes.
Through your neck or on your wrist. and they would always kind of make it like a classroom experiment, and not necessarily a competitive thing, but when you got a bunch of boys like, who are competing with each other every so finding different ways to compete with each other, it's like, oh, whoever has the lowest heart rate is supposed to be the healthiest one. So it was almost like a competition who could have the lowest heart rate.
Mhm.
So unbeknownst to me, I always had, because of how active I was throughout my life, I've always actually had one of the more lower ones in the class.
And your diet
that was also
as well.
Right, and that had a big part to do with the fresh foods that I was eating.
Yeah,
So
no,
that was a big part of it also with being active.
it's definitely out of the norm from what most people in our community experience, between the pizzas, the fast foods, the milkshakes, all the availability of a sugar-based diet that leads to heart disease and diabetes. You avoided a lot of it, mostly because of your guidance from your mother. And a lot has to do with that. And on another episode, we actually interviewed my mother, and she was the first anti-sugar, sugar substitute, fresh foods guiding my life, but I didn't necessarily listen. So it down the road, it affected me more on my father's side than I would say my mother's side. And my father ended up having a lot of heart problems because he was more of a steak and potato couple times a week guy. And
it's pretty much the common thing in America, the meat and potatoes thing.
And my mom wasn't. My mom was always more fish and chicken and much more vegetables and fruit. And even though I was in the middle of all that, eventually it didn't prevent me from having heart disease. But I commend you and congratulate you. So let's fast forward a little. Like in your 20s, were you playing competitive sports?
Well, yeah, that was actually when I got the most competitive, because I was actually playing. That's when I was playing in college, and I was blessed enough to play. I played college, and I've also was playing semi-pro after the fact that I was playing college.
Oh wow!
And I was able to go as far as winning. I was able to go as far as winning a conference championship with my respective school. And when you win your conference, that's what you see on television, is the NCAA tournament.
Yes.
So I was actually blessed enough to go compete in the NCAA tournament. We didn't go far, but not so many people could say they were even able to step through the door.
No, I understand. That's a tremendous accomplishment.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when did you realize?
Definitely a team effort.
See, I want to take it back a little bit. So
what was that?
So I want to bring it back a little bit, then come forward again. So you had the athletic abilities. So you said you were about 13 when you first got into it. You first took it seriously. At some point when we were talking in advance, you said you were monitoring your mother's diet. You were monitoring when she would cook, and you would tell her not to put salt in the food because
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about that.
So I was almost hyper paranoid, and it had absolutely nothing to do with the heart murmur, because like I said, I guess we kind of like found our rhythm with that. So everything else kind of was kind of formulated to enhance everything else. And I've always had this theory that about 12, 13 years old is when kids kind of figure out what sports they're going to dedicate themselves to and what sports they're actually going to be good at. That's kind of what separates your casual athletes and versus the kids who take the sport serious. And again, being in a single mother home, after school, it was either I always had to go to some kind of practice or some kind of training. And even in the summertime, I had to figure out how to stay busy. So I was in high school, I was kind of a unofficial 3-sport athlete. I played soccer was my main sport. Basketball in the winter, because I was just blessed with the athletic ability and the sport IQ to make the school team, but I wasn't good enough to be on the starting roster. But being on the starting roster had little importance to me. It was more about being in a team environment and staying active, and I'd rather be playing sports with my friends than be home in the middle of winter not being able to be that's when it gets harder to play soccer, because it's for the obvious reasons of there being snow on the ground.
Mm.
And in the summertime, I was actually put into boxing. Well, my mother played around with different like combats growing up, because once she wanted me to be able to defend myself, and she be someone who's not to be messed with, but also having to the know how to control it.
Oh wow!
And that's something they kind of, if you're in any kind of a combat sport environment, that's kind of the first thing they teach you. Is that we're teaching you this to be disciplined and not to just willy-nilly start like punching kids in the face just because you know how.
Because you know how to do it, exactly.
So I was, yeah, just because you know how to doesn't mean you should.
Exactly. And
they kind of they instill they instill that to you at a very early stage in your training.
Okay.
So I was actually once I kind of fell in love with boxing.
Okay.
Mainly because of my cultural and heritage background. Mexico has very prominent boxers throughout history.
Oh, huge.
So I fell in love with it naturally, and yeah. And so I got into competing. I was on track to go towards the Golden Gloves at a very young age.
Okay.
So that's actually where my jump rope today came from. That's kind of where I kind of picked up that habit.
Got it.
But
it's a good habit. So the jump rope into your boxing training. That was in your boxing training. The jump rope.
Right.
Okay. Well, let me comment on that.
Let me go back to the diet thing.
Okay, go ahead.
So at that age, at around 13, 14 is when I picked up the book. And in that book, it kind of told us, different ways to how to set up your diet plan to compete at the highest level for practices and for game day. And somewhere in there, I kind of misinterpreted something, and it said heavy salts are bad for you, which is true. It says, that's in my mind. I was like, if I have too much salt in my diet, I'm gonna get dehydrated. I'm gonna cramp. So I would walk in and out of the kitchen when my mom would be cooking and monitor. I'm like, Mom, don't put salt in my food because I'm gonna dehydrate and cramp on the field. Don't put it. And she would like laugh at me, disregard me, because she has to season the food somehow. She's not just gonna put bland food out. I've never been to a Mexican household that had bland food on the table. So my mom would laugh, and she would sneak the salt in to make sure she seasoned it the way that she wanted to. And now I know better. I know you actually do need your body does need a little bit of salt to actually hydrate itself.
Absolutely.
So and everything in moderation. That's what they always tell you. It's just that some people don't know what that moderation level is.
No.
Well, one of the things
that's where that habit kind of picked up.
In my own travels of heart disease and nutrition, the relationship that I became aware of was salt with potassium. That it's the salt and the potassium that manage your electrical system in your heart and your body. And it was something that my doctors had always watched. And where I would never, ever really have a salt issue, what I ended up having was a potassium issue. And you end up learning that the two have a relationship in managing how your organs are working. And was potassium did that ever come across your radar in your diet plans?
Well, I wasn't focused on the potassium itself, but I knew potassium was in bananas, important. And bananas was always in the house.
Yes.
Yeah, so but later in life I also found out bananas are good and bad depending on when you have them.
Yes.
And coaches always gave out bananas as well.
Okay.
So the potassium in the bananas and the sugar in the bananas kind of help you. One, they reduce your risks of cramping and dehydration.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the amount of natural sugars in the banana, it keeps you active.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have bananas in the beginning of the day with your meal or right before a training session, it's good. But if you have a banana at night, it's very bad because of how high it is. And because of how high it is in natural sugars. And then because you're in a sedative state, in a stationary state for a prolonged time, that sugar just sits in your body. And because your body doesn't know what to do with it, it stores it for later, and then it gets stored in as fat. So that's kind of like the double-edged sword that you play with the bananas. And funny enough, the other reason why bananas were always available at home was my mother. She grew up because they had a lot of fish because of the river that I had mentioned earlier.
Sure.
They would have a lot of fish, and one of the ways that they would, if you happen to get the misfortune of having a bone stuck in your throat, they would suggest having a banana to help wash it down because of the consistency of the banana will catch the bone and help pass. And so there's always bananas on in the pantry. Yeah.
So there's something that
I don't
you
know
want.
if that's a real story. Don't hold me that's fact. I've never had to use that. I've never had to use.
No, but it just sounds.
But
It
that was
sounds
something my mother like stood by.
Yeah, but
Well, but
so the banana would actually, if you had a bone stuck in your throat and you were to eat a banana, the banana in theory would actually
loosen the bone.
loosen the bone up. I'm assuming it can't naturally decompose it.
Loosen the bone and help it pass.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, no, it's probably gonna sit in there for a while, but it's
Well,
better
you
than
know-
choking, I guess.
You better hope that you don't choke in the process before the bone doesn't go down. That would suck.
That's amazing.
Yep.
Yeah,
So,
you always hear new things from different people from different places, and natural remedies are certainly one. So that's an amazing story.
now tell us about in your modern day at this point. What are you doing do you still monitor your heart? Even though you kind of grew out of it, but do you still monitor it at this point? And and then explain your gym routine as well. I know that in the gym, you really go out there I'm just enamored by your routine, especially your cardio, because you spend a lot of time doing cardio. I've never seen you lift weights. I've always seen you do cardio and always exercise that involved your body weight. A little bit about that.
So one of my theories is that if this isn't something I can do, so I'm 34 now, and I've been working out in regards to the gym, roughly about 6 years now. And my theory along the way that I've kind of come to the conclusion is that if I can't do this when I'm 60, 65, 70 years old, then I probably shouldn't be doing this now. So for me, it's what can I do sustainably long term is what I'm going to continue to do. And just through my research and looking over different routines, different body types, and just my own personals, I've learned that moving your own body weight in regards to calisthenics is probably the best way to stay fit and strong well into your later days of life. Because I'm always those are the guys that I'm seeing that are about, you go into the city and see these gyms that are put outside that are just pull-up bars and dip bars, and I just see these guys that are way much more into their senior years still able to do these. So that's what I incorporate into my workout routine: legs, push, pull, legs. So push just means anytime you're literally pushing, which is kind of like a chest workout, like a push-up, a bench press, or dip. And a pull is just that. It could be a pull-up, barbell, a dumbbell curl. And that's my Monday and Tuesday. It's just strictly body weight, and I'll add weight to myself through a weighted vest to increase the difficulty. And then Wednesday I kind of do it's like a stability day. So I kind of take care of my lower limbs without having to do extremely high weights in regards to like squatting very heavily. Because form is also important to me. Because again, if you can't do this long term, then you probably shouldn't be doing it short term.
Yes.
So I kind of do that to make sure that my lower limbs are always able to sustain what I have to do.
Yep. I want to comment on
the same kind of the same thing again on Thursday and Friday, but that's all free weight work.
Because you were the one that helped me. There were a couple of things you helped me with in the gym. You helped me with my crunches, my ab work. Because you said that I was pulling too hard on my neck. Mm-hmm. So you made the adjustment on that.
Yeah.
Now I do that on a regular basis now at that point. Because I also feel the end results are much better. Like I actually feel it before. I think I was putting too much pressure on my neck, and not getting a lot of the results in my abs. So that makes I will say that is a testament to your abilities, because when you showed me something, it wasn't bullshit. It actually worked.
I'm really impressed with the intensity and the management of how you break down all
so
the
that's also like,
exercises.
Yes.
so
It
I'm a big
to me it
believer in
Yes.
balance.
can you talk about that more?
So
About
what
how
I've learned is so balance is important in all aspects, but what I mean is on a physical level is, if you look around, you see guys, they favor a lot of chest workouts. And if you notice, you'll see they'll have their shoulders rolled forward.
Yes.
And then that creates bad posture.
Yep.
And now what that means is you have to remember our entire body is connected, especially through our muscle tissue. And if your chest is much stronger than your back, that's what's pulling the shoulders forward.
Yes.
And now vice versa, if your the back muscles is a lot stronger than your chest, you have a much more forward push chest because of the tension that it's creating, and that can all create different problems along the way. So it's always having to balance everything out was always important to me.
I just want to say for the
Making
record,
sure I did the
I'm
right
out of
amount
balance. I'm very out of balance.
Right, you say he's out of balance.
Most of us are. Most of us are, and you kind of have to walk that fine line, and being off balance isn't a bad thing. But yeah, so I kind of
What do you think that people should do in reference to that?
What was that?
So what do you think that people should do? Because I mean, look, where our country's 65% obesity, I think it is. I think it might be over. I find that when they give you a stat, they give you a number, it seems to be actually worse than that.
Yeah.
So, like, what do you recommend? And especially with your generation, because you're part of the digital age, and I find with the digital age, they seem to be locked into their doing the whole text messaging thing. Everything is digital. Everything's on a computer.
Device oriented.
It's always device oriented, and it seems to be device oriented and instant gratification, where taking care of yourself is delayed gratification.
Yeah.
You have to get the results in the long run. So what do you recommend, especially to this generation in particular? I find that my generation is a little, we're kind of a little off. I might be the last.
So you hit the. So for me, no, you hit the nail on the head with the instant gratification. So, and that relationship that people have with their phones and technology, because everything is instantaneous.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a huge dopamine spike when we have these instant results, and people want things now. They don't want to wait for the results to show up later. Mm-hmm. And that kind of goes along the way with how easily available bad food is.
Sure.
Because it's usually a lot easier to make. Like it doesn't take that much effort to just season some chicken and drop it in a deep fryer. Because it's quick and easy, and it comes right back out. Also, the other thing is America's favorite fruit texture is crunch. Which is, if you look around, all the foods around us have some kind of a crunch to it. All of our favorite foods, and that's usually a testament to us deep frying most of our foods. So
I'm going to ask. Okay, go ahead. You can finish.
So if kind of like, so if crunch is your favorite texture, you can kind of cheat your way. It's like eating some carrots or eating some celery, because that kind of has a crunch to it.
Sure.
And you can kind of dress that up in a way that you kind of want. So if you can know yourself and know what you like, you can kind of guide your way through a supermarket in a similar fashion. Mm-hmm. But you just have to kind of understand what it is that you kind of like, what you like yourself. Yeah, and formulate things to make it easier for you.
as a member of the not digital device community and had to become in as it advanced, one of the things that I wanted to ask you was, you seem to be the exception to the rule. Because you know you're having a heart murmur. You know you have to eat right. You know you have to exercise, and you want to be competitive. But when you look on the phones, it's basically the instant gratification is, I'm either blessed with this good health or I'm not. And do you think that would stop people from trying to eat better, from trying to exercise, because they just look at the phone, see somebody else, and they go, that's just not me? What do you feel about that?
Everyone forgets that, especially when they puts their best face forward. So they're not showing you the failures. They're not showing you the times that there's setbacks. They're not showing you the times that they couldn't do the things that everybody is amazed. So I experienced a very similar thing, because when I started, I jump rope a lot, and that became from boxing. But for boxing, it was more of a warm up thing, and you would do very simple moves. If you could throw in a couple crisscrosses in there, you were pretty advanced. And when I was messing up on the jump rope, nobody paid attention to me in the gym. But then when I learned how to do all these turns and spins and these different elaborate tricks with the jump rope, is when everybody started to come and ask me about the jump rope. Same thing with the pull-up. When I was doing a regular pull-up and struggling to do 3 to 5 for a workout, nobody paid attention to me. But now when I'm doing close to 200 on a Tuesday, everybody wants to ask me about pull-ups, as if like I just figured out yesterday that I can do these things.
Wait, how many do you do in
so
total?
on my Tuesday, I average.
Did you hear that, Anthony?
Pull-ups in the day.
Yeah, that's nuts. So how many do you do in total? Dude, that's
how many
like,
total?
Roughly 200 on the.
So you do 200, and you do not all at once.
Not at one shot. By the time the day is done, I would have accumulated close. I would have compounded close to 200 pull-ups, if not more, depending on the day.
They used to say that. They used to say that about Herschel Walker. That Herschel Walker wasn't a weightlifter, but that Herschel Walker, by the end of his routine, was doing 1,000 push-ups and 1,000 sit-ups a day, training for football. I'm hearing the similarity in the story here, and that it seems like he achieved that balance, and it wasn't from weight training.
Yeah.
Yes. So I mean, again, growing up, all the best athletes that I knew around me, they weren't spending hours and hours in the weight room. They were, they did drills that were sport specific to them.
Which is ironic, because Anthony and I went to the same high school, and the one thing we can tell you is that the strongest guys were always bench pressing in the weight room.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a cardio thing, and it was always about power as opposed to endurance.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. They were strong in the weight room.
So
in the street, they sucked. If they got into a street fight, they usually have their ass handed to them, because if they
couldn't breathe,
if they couldn't get a hold of you in the first 15 seconds, they were done. All they had to do was run around and tire them out, and then literally pick them apart. Just slowly but surely pick them apart. And that's the reason why back then the routine was always power and not so much cardio. Well, today it's all about the cardio. Especially you would know, because straight from Mexico, Mexican fighters, the one thing they're known for is their
endurance.
Their endurance. You punch them in the face, they don't get exhausted. They keep on coming until you have to practically kill these guys half the times, and otherwise they'll just keep on going. I
mean, they instilled that in us through our stories, through our childhood stories about like the Aztec Empire and how we overcame, the conquistadors. How we're always fighting. We never back down. So it's always been like a pride thing for us to keep going. And my mother always instilled that in me too. She's like, no matter what, she's like, we're not victims. We're not victims. We're survivors, and we're victors.
Wow.
And it's kind of a theory. I kind of talked about this earlier with a friend of mine. It's if you look back at your family history and at your ancestors, we come from a very long line of warriors, and you know, our ancestors defeated hordes of enemy invasions and different things that were intended to wipe out that wiped out entire cities and towns. And it's almost, if you don't put your best foot forward today, it's almost like a slap in the face to your ancestors of previous times that fought so hard for you to be here.
Okay.
Because if you just look at mathematically how many died and how many lines of family lines have just died off, something about that, and understand that, you know, there were a lot of fighters in your life before you.
Sure.
A lot of people fought for you to be here. So
Do you think
I've
I've
always had that in the back of my mind, where it's like I have to keep going forward. I have to do my best.
Okay. Do you think a lot of people forgot about that, especially now with the shitty diets, and then you have the instant gratification, and everything is device oriented, electronic device oriented? Do you think people have kind of lost their way in that department?
I think people are too forward looking, and they forget about what was before them that brought us here.
Oh,
And
so you think that
they lose sight of that?
Okay, so that for that reason alone, well, you don't think that being forward-looking and also interjecting your past history can be a combination that people can work with?
Because you have to. It's almost like a it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's almost like a not a theory.
It's a progression.
Not an kind of like an equation, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, so your past influences your decision making today, and the decisions you make today influence tomorrow. But a lot of people forget about their past, and they kind of throws off their decision making now.
Technology.
So you know, a lot of the stuff that happened in my past, you know, I use that. Yeah. So I mean, how use that to navigate what I do forward. You know, you can't look.
No, how do you think people should change that? I mean, it sounds like you know where you're going, obviously, because you've built really good habits, and you maintain those habits. I mean, how do you think people should? I mean, look, does society need an overall restructural change, or you know, is there restructuring that it really needs, or do you think that people individually should actually start to think of the overall health?
So be with failure. Because anytime you start something new, it doesn't matter what it is, you're not going to be good at it, especially if you've never done. Percent of people that excel at something the first time they've ever tried it.
Sure.
And you can
Edel, if I could ask you a question, how do you feel today? How's your heart working? Are you at a form of life? Are you pushing forward? And what's next for you?
Feel I'm probably in the best shape I've ever been in my life in regards to my physical health. I'm my most athletic, but I'm definitely my best shape, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course it does. I mean, you're talking to two guys here in their 50s, and where I would say Anthony is definitely more of a positive physical specimen than I am. I'm the opposite end, who's gone through a lot of procedures to keep kicking here. And I see Anthony flexing. I don't flex that much. And you know, to both of us to be at this part and talk to you, we both wish we can go back in time and start a bunch of things over. Yeah. And you know, not many people are focused on their health as a priority, because we live in such a fast-paced digital community, instant gratification kind of culture. Mm-hmm. And to hear you talk about that is really eye-opening, and it's refreshing. And we really hope that people watching and listening to this find you as an example and a role model of how to overcome. We've spoken to people already. The most common theme is we've heard heart murmur as a child.
Yep.
And it related to valve issues. And everybody that hasn't been focused like you have your whole life are going to run into surgery. They're going to run into replacements. Yeah. And we don't see that for you. We see you overcoming that with lifestyle and exercise.
I see you doing lots of. I see you doing.
And also,
I see you doing 400 pull-ups by the time you hit 75. Straight through.
I hope I'm blessed enough to be able to continue that and have no hiccups along the way.
Yep.
It's definitely been I'm definitely aware of the blessings that have come my way and the things I had to do to maintain those as well.
Okay.
Because some people they're bestowed blessings, but they don't know what to do with them all the time.
Okay. So before we wrap up, like, what are your final words to people who want to get into shape, and if they have a heart thing, like, what would you suggest that they do?
So first, remember, the phone is a tool. It's just like being in a mechanic shop. If you don't know how to use a wrench, then you're kind of shit out of luck. But if you got a wrench and you know how to use a wrench, you can do a lot with it. There's definitely a lot of apps out there that can help you formulate a nice diet plan, or a nice workout plan, a nice routine that will work for you. Always formulate these things that work for yourself, because what works for me may not work for somebody else that's watching or listening. And you focus on some breath work, because our breath rate is in very deep relationship with our heart rate.
Yes.
So if you can kind of manage your breath work, you can kind of get yourself around a lot of the problems. Because as I said before, heart murmurs leave you prone to panic attacks and vulnerable and high anxiety situations.
Okay.
So if you can do the inner work to understand yourself, you can kind of express that outwardly in a different in a healthy manner.
Okay. Awesome.
That's fantastic. Thank you for coming on today.
Yes.
I always learn something new and different from our guests.
No, thanks.
Because I'm going to say I've made every mistake and been blessed to overcome it. And whenever I'm reading someone's book or we're doing an interview, I always get this piece of advice that will stick with me. And I got more than one today from you, Edel. And I want to thank you again for coming out.
Yep. Thank you very much, Edel.
No, thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. We'll have you come on again next time.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk more, because you have a lot of insight into how people should eat and exercise.
Yep.
And it's something we want to express to people watching the show.
No, I'd be more than happy to. If I can help eliminate other people's mistakes on their learning process and help move that forward progress a little bit faster, then why not? Information is for everybody, not just for individuals.
Well, help Anthony. He needs it now.
I need it now.
Help Anthony. He needs it now. Being too late.
The one thing he sees me doing, where I want to pick up more on the cardio, where I'm pretty good on the hip mobility part. That's where the flexibility part I'm pretty solid in. It's my cardio I need to really work on. Especially,
I will give you that. The way I've seen you stretch before, I don't know if a lot of people, even my age, can get their foot up that high while stretching.
He takes pictures. Don't worry, we all see it.
I'll trust. Yep. Awesome. All right. Thanks, dude.
Thanks, Edel.
Thanks, guys.